Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, the weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. I know, another week without doing too much in the way of videos. Like I said, I'm getting settled in, and it's been kind of a nice change of pace. You know, you put yourself through the ringer for 11 years, and get a little bit of peace, and it's a nice change of pace. Besides, I've got something important I'm waiting on Monday, and my brain power is going into a lot of that, so I'm going to be getting into a little bit more regular stuff, making use of my mornings more so to actually produce my content, and only the evenings if it's available to me. But the plan is starting to work its way in, so we'll probably start to get some more content out this week, probably another raid retrospective, State of the Realm for sure this week on Forked Tower, and maybe a couple of other things. We're going to start slow and work our way in just so I can get a rhythm. I also kind of want to upload. I did a big pack opening for Magic the Gathering X Final Fantasy, as you can see back here. It was an okay pack opening. I didn't get anything too crazy. I had a couple of lucky hits, but nothing too major. I'm going to be opening a few more, and then that'll be it for Final Fantasy X Magic the Gathering. But I figured I could just upload that stream as its own video. It's technically in the live channel. If you ever miss anything on stream, it's almost always in the live channel on YouTube if you just tab over to that. But I might upload that too. I might like edit it down. It's like 7 hours, but still. All the same, I want to get into the Q&A so I can get started with stream since I'm doing this in the morning. But yeah, thank you everyone for asking questions. Remember, always ask your questions in the comment section below. I'm saying it before I start answering the questions instead of after, so you know I can say what I can do what I say I'm gonna do every week. Also, thanks to the card shop that actually provided me with all of these cards. They just sent me a bunch of packs and then gave me a discount code for people to use. So if you're looking for Final Fantasy X Magic the Gathering cards, whether they be the regular boosters, collector's boosters, you can see if they've still got some stock. They restocked right when pre-release began. So, or even the day before pre-release, they restocked the website for pre-orders. So be sure to give that a look. Use discount code Mr. Happy. There will be a link in the description. Steel Sears, of course, has been very understanding with me with all the things that have been going on in my life over the past few months. So if you're ever looking for gaming peripherals, be sure to use my discount code and use my link for that as well. And of course, thanks to you guys, especially those of you on Patreon who support, even though I have no content that's paywalled anywhere on my anywhere on my channel. Sorry, I just ate breakfast too. I don't like to paywall anything, and I'd like to definitely keep it that way. That's not a hint that I'm gonna change it, by the way. That's not a consideration. Just realized after I said it sounds like a consideration. No. But yeah, I just thank you to them. Anyway, let's go on to the Q&A. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey Haps, hi. You and some others have mentioned that the way CE spawn and OC might be to convince some people out in the zone to be out in the zone more instead of just waiting at camp. I think this is at odds with the fact that Cult Return has no cooldown. No, I think the pacing of the zone is the reason why a Cult Return has no cooldown. They very much want you to be kind of committing to one thing, whether that's treasure hunting, magic pots, Fate CEs, gold farming, but they also don't want you to have to kind of walk everywhere necessarily. Like you do, but like not from base. So they make it so that the map has a really quick pace and is really accessible, but that you basically never have to wait for something that you want to do to be happening around the map. So I think that's the only reason. And the return wait for new boss thing is because people are afraid of missing fates. But everyone who wants a particular CE to spawn, they'll normally go out of their way and spawn it. You know, if they want the Berserker one to spawn, they'll go kill Demon Pawns. If they want the Oracle Soul Shard one to spawn, they'll go kill the fans. So it gives the people who really want a more concentrated effort a reason to get out there without them really having to like wholly commit to doing that, because if another CE spawns and they don't want to miss that, then they can still make it back. So it's that way to keep up with the pace of the zone, I feel. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello again, sir. Hi, a good day to you. A question kind of on your discussion last week about relics and tome zones. Why is it no one remembers Heavensward, specifically the sand step? There were so many ways to get progress on that step. You could buy the regions from just about every currency in the game, beast tribes at Realm Reborn and Heavensward. You could trade in tokens from the Alexander raids. You could use Crafter and Gatherer scripts. You could trade in Amber and Case Violkins from the rare chest doing leaves. CET or Realm Reborn 24-man regions. You could also use the primal ones. I remember there was like an exchange for Ifrit, Garuda, and Titan, and then another one for like Ramu, Leviathan, Shiva, which almost nobody did. That was such a silly one. It basically took everything in the game at the time and made it to where you get some components currency from that activity, then trade in for more sand, so players could essentially do whatever they wanted and get progress on that step. Yeah, that same philosophy they have kind of just boiled down to all of those things give tomes, so why don't we just make it tomes? They're not wrong. That's the problem, is that Tombstone philosophy is technically not wrong. You can do anything, almost anything in the game, and make progress towards the relic. The problem is that tomes are effectively a currency that is used across multiple things. And as the game ages, everything gets put into the same tombstone, and that of poetics. So they flooded poetics with so many uses that if you ever want to go back and do those things, and you want to do more than one of them, you effectively cannibalize the entire currency. Even mid-expansion, when it is the uncapped currency, it effectively cannibalizes the currency to the point where you can't use anything. You can't use it for anything else. So all that content that you're doing is to fuel the relic, and it's like, it's this sole thing. But if you want to use tomes for something else, you really have no choice but to keep throwing them at your relic and just, you know, accept that that's the way that it is. And that's why the other options would be good. And the Heaven's Word Sandstep, yeah, is one of the primo examples. It's not the only one. Even just look back at Shadowbringers, where we didn't have a billion tombstone steps, which may be what happens here. You had some where you could grind inside, some where you could grind outside, and there were still problems with that, especially with the Delubrum step, which to this day is a bane for anyone trying to get the Shadowbringer relics done. And definitely a piece of the step that I don't agree with. I think the Palace of the Dead drop rate at the very least should have been 100% for every 10 floors, and then maybe on the higher floors reward more than one. That definitely would mitigate the RNG aspect, and people who are going for solo runs, or maybe would be incentivized to do solo runs, now have these extra things. Even if you group up with 3 other players and climb to the top, that would be way better. But it like incentivizes some more gameplay within Palace of the Dead, because nobody really wanted to do that step in there, the time-worn artifacts. 4 unidentified bones before you could get it from beast tribes and raids. Sandstep basically reused that. Yeah, it meant adding it to steps later was really easy, which was another nice thing. Why is it everyone thinks that a relic step can only be tomes or this? Well, I mean, that's kind of been my point, is that I've never asked it to be tomes or X. I've always asked it to be tomes and X, because I think that the tombstone safety net is a really healthy thing to have, but I want it to be the safety net and not the gold standard of how they're done. Meaning that if I want to do an extra activity that also trickles down tombstones, but directly benefits the creation of the relics, that it speeds it up. I don't want to slow it down to add more steps to it. I want to keep it the same pace, but add activities that contribute towards getting it done faster. That's actually all I want. It doesn't have to be one thing. It could be 2, 3, 4 things, like you said with the Heaven's Word Relic. But I feel like that part of the conversation is constantly missed. Why is it every time I bring up adding more options that people go, well, I like tombstones? Okay, congratulations. I'm telling you, you can have that. Just get something else on top of it. It doesn't make any sense to me. But you're right. Yeah, I don't know. All right, so this one's not a hashtag. I was scrolling down for a bit, and there was just a whole bunch of comments, so I don't know how many questions there actually are. So I'm just going to address, because this is kind of a continuation from the conversation from last week. CLL and Dolariata are dead. What? It pops constantly and usually has at least 6 people. During prime time, it's like 20, like every 40 minutes or however much time between them. There's no way BA is being run as often as every 40 minutes on every server. DR, on the other hand, is never run. Why? Because you can't queue into it while in Bosia. Making content that requires you to go hunting for a Discord is a giant fuck you to average players that just don't want to deal with having to figure out 20 different external sources just to play the game. Well, it's only one. It's Discord. So the 20 is, I speak in hyperbole all the time. It's fine. But I think this is a matter of anecdote, because I get complaints all the time from players asking me why they can't get anyone to do CLL, why they can't get anyone to do Dolariata. And my first reaction is always like, are you on Dynamis? You know, that's number one. But most of the time they tell me, no, I'm on Primal, no, I'm on Ether. So I think what we have here is a matter of anecdote, where during prime time, you're probably getting a somewhat reasonable amount of CLL and Dolariatas if you're actually participating in the zone during that specific time. But if you're someone who can't specifically play during prime time, you're kind of screwed. Now, in reality, is that the most important thing in this takeaway from what you have here? No, the takeaway is that at the very least, the in and out is consistent. People can always go in and out whenever they please, assuming there's at least a few enough other people that want to do it. And that's completely fair. I think it's a matter of different ideology here, where I was more comparing it to DRS, but CLL and Dolariata, like I said, anecdotally, I've seen people run into tons of issues getting other players to participate. DR normal is realistically where a lot of the problems end up lying, though, because while people do absolutely make PFs for Delubrum Regine normal, If you try to queue in normally, it's effectively dead on every server. You have to join one of those PFs, or you might as well not waste your time. And that's really unfortunate. That's one of the main problems. Dulibrum has a ton of issues. I think it was one of my favorite things to do in Shadowbringers, but going back to it now is just an absolute disaster. If you want to make a relic, you have to find a PF that's either running it a bunch of times or at least once, that's doing it like for the weekly, for whatever, for the other thing, for the other step. It's so much of a pain. But more so, I guess the original point I was making is that BA is the long form adoption. And you can easily see that in terms of field op community participation, BA is the most frequently organized and done content deliberately, I guess is the better way to put it. Like it's similar to like deep dungeons, where like it's kind of hard to do a deep dungeon with a group randomly. Like if you want to do Palace that did 1 to 50 right now, you're probably doing it solo. Unless you maybe make a PF or shout for someone. Like you have to put in some form of social effort. And I'm sure there are Discords that also can assist people with that. I'm not aware of them, but I'm sure there are, because I can't be all-knowing in that regard. And then with field ops, I mean, BA is just so frequently coordinated and run across tons of different data centers by tons of different Discords. Whereas Delubrum, yeah, people put together those PFs or maybe throw up a PF on like the weekend or something like that. There's a couple, and then depending on your data center, more or less success. And DRS is basically run by the BA people, but just not as often, or run by people who also do BA, but not as often as BA is, because it is a lot harder, and it is something that is far more prone to being, to wiping players, because it's a higher difficulty curve. Whereas BA is much easier. Like, even if you've never done it before, you listen to a few basic callouts, especially with the power creep, you can blast through that in no time. I just go back and do BA for funsies plenty of times, because it's a really low stress environment despite the permadeath. And Fort Tower is effectively playing the long game more than anything else. Is they clearly see how much BA has like fostered community over the years, and they're kind of aiming for Forked Tower to do the same thing, where it will foster community for years. Now, I do think they missed some of the marks on the rewards. Yes, Twirl is in there, and yes, the +2 armor is in there, but BA's rewards were generally better. In my opinion, still. I think the fact that you can sell those materials that make the Kirin Osode and make the Vermilion Cloak, they're not super expensive, but they're valuable for newcomers coming in and for people who want those glams at any point going forward to not have to actually do the content, but as an incentive for people to maybe consider it at some point. The mount is obviously a big one. The upgrade to the armor, in case you plan on doing other Eureka, working on more Eureka relics, or if you really just are a completionist in that regard, the conditional virtue minion drops from there, a few other glams. But, you know, and honestly, the fragments in Eureka are the one remaining, like, ultra valuable thing. Some of them sell for, like, 20 to 50k a pop, and it's absolutely nuts. But I think that's what they're aiming for. And BA has definitely fostered the best long-form community of all the field op related things. It's part of the only reason why the concept of getting into a Discord to do stuff like DRS and Fort Tower is kind of a community norm at this point. And I understand if you've come in and you're not used to that community norm and you don't want to participate in it because you have to go to an external resource. I get it. I hate joining Discords too, but it is no doubt the thing that has fostered the most consistent, like, community driven thing. And a big point of what they're trying to do in Dawntrail is put the M back in MMO, the first one. I guess maybe both, the massive and the multiplayer. And that they're trying to create activities that foster that kind of environment, those kind of communities, and hoping that people will, instead of complaining, get into those communities and be a part of them, be a part of something more than just playing on their own. Not every player wants that. So there's definitely going to be heads butting when it comes to anecdote, statement, statistics, all that stuff. Because I think we're all always going to reach for the thing that we think is the most correct. Unless we have the hard data, it's always going to be anecdotal data. So, yeah, it's a weird situation. I don't think there's going to be a point where myself and others are in complete agreement, but we also need to recognize that there's just the aims and the goals are different, and the execution is different, and everyone on both sides has things that they like and don't like, and we just need to, like, focus on the feedback of getting the best system going forward. At the end of the day, that's what matters. And if the best system going forward is a Fort Tower equivalent, a BA equivalent, where the normal mode is that kind of like random queue-in thing, but if 48 players walk into an instance and want to do the hard mode version, they can do it. That might be the answer going forward. And I think that's probably the middle ground that people actually want the most, because people don't want to fight for the entry, including the raiders that love this type of content, and the normal players just want something that isn't a hardcore raid. We've gotten so many hardcore raids over the years, something that they may struggle with, may die, may wipe, may have good groups, bad groups, whatever, but it's no different really than their alliance raids, and they get to use those fancy new phantom actions, which could definitely use more of a playground than they currently have. So that's where, I guess, just reading that comment, I wanted to continue along the train of thought of continuing that discussion. And then I scroll down, there was another thesis here. We got plenty of thesi here. Everyone just picked the best option anyways, the worst excuse not to try anything different, especially a game with as tired a formula as 14. There are already clearly better mathematical choices in the game in its current state, yet people still choose the one they prefer. Job choice, leveling method, guild making methods, you name it, someone is choosing it, no one cares. Those aren't really good examples, because those are like baseline decisions that they're macro decisions, I suppose. It's the micro decisions where the mathematical differences really come to play. So I think last week I talked about the idea that somebody, I think, asked what they would do after level 100. I think it was that question. And I effectively boiled it down to, you will start the expansion at one power level and end, and there will be no choices in between. And effectively adding the choice for a player is just a chance for them to be wrong. And that is exactly what ends up happening. There's a point where the decisions you offer are basically inconsequential, and thus making the different decision might get you like a side eye. Maybe someone who's really try hard will make mention of it, but like most of the time you're just like, whatever. I mean, we saw that with cross-class actions. We saw that with attribute points, of all things. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, oh, here's 30 attribute points. Surely they can't fuss over this. And yeah, so Final Fantasy XIV's made a habit of making mountains out of molehills, so if you create an actual mountain, it's going to become a problem, effectively. You obsess over trying to control player behavior instead of making it a fun game to play, you end up with some of the worst systems in the MMO space. MSQ gameplay and boring close-off maps that feel lifeless, other than 99% of the time a hunt train doesn't teleport in and back out within minutes. I always say this, when you want open world, it's strange to me, specifically. Not to want open world, because I've played Guild Wars 2, I've played, old WoW, I've done all those types of things. There's, how do I put this? There are activities that take place in the open world. Everything in every game serves a specific purpose, right? Final Fantasy XIV has chosen to create casual activities in the open world that basically anyone and everyone can participate in at their leisure. If you want to spam fates to level your shared fate level, or to work on your bicolored gemstones for materials or for the mount, you can do that. If you want to go do treasure maps with a group of people, you'll fly around the map, go to the set spots, do those there. You will get teleported into an instance afterwards if you do get the portal, which is what you want, but that gets you flying around. Gathering, fishing, whatever, all those activities are meant to be kind of like casually enjoyable things in the open world. They don't want hardcore progression in that open world. They want your main story to be a largely linear experience that everyone can participate in, that doesn't really require a whole lot. Any player of any skill level can come back. They may struggle with some of the combat related bits, but at the end of the day, they're going to get it done in a timely fashion. The zones facilitate that with side activities, and that's what they've chosen to do. Within the rest of the scope of the game, they want you picking and choosing the activities that you actually want to do in any other of the locations or instances that they have. That doesn't make an MMO boring or the map closed off and lifeless. The map is effectively serving its purpose, and that doesn't mean you have to like it. That's the key point. You can be someone who loves bustling maps, like sandboxy style MMOs, like ArcAge, where people just kind of do it. That's totally fine, but you have to understand the landscape in which the game that you're actually playing exists in the ecosystem that it creates, because that is how 14 has always been. Final Fantasy XIV, from the beginning, has stated that it's facilitating the MSQ with the maps. And then, of course, side quests and lore and world building and stuff. All that is done very well with the maps, but they are not meant to be places where you will spend gratuitous amounts of endgame time. So the goal has been very obviously present. So still trying to get it. Like, don't get me wrong, I'd be okay with it. I mean, I lived that for years, but it's just not the game for that, unless they create a new system, which is why they generally create the field ops, because it emulates that kind of idea. There's so many things that can try to make the game better, but you have to actually have ideas first. I'd love to work through MSQ zones with more battle content in the form of actually having to do fates or CEs, only to revisit zones later for an endgame grind. That means we weren't falling asleep scrolling through text and cutscenes over half the time. So you just don't like MSQ, because here's the thing. Everything you just said will never happen. I can assure you that. And you want to know how I know that? because I've made suggestions like that in videos, and I've seen the thesis of that people present as to why that's not a good idea. I like literally people who have never had a thing to say to me, casual players who just basically do the story and chill. I've never gotten so much response from like suggesting things that kind of diminish the casual experience, because most people do want to just go through the MSQ and not do fates and CEs and then revisit a zone for endgame. That is the majority. The only endgame grinds are effectively your glamour grinds, your bicolored gemstones, your treasure map, like any of the achievements or like progressions that you're working through for that. I'm telling you right now, you will never be satisfied with Final Fantasy XIV. As the type of player that you want to be, you have been playing the wrong game for 11 years. There's no other way to really say it. Like, you want an old school MMO experience, you want a sandboxy experience. And Final Fantasy XIV from day one has been a theme park experience, which does not include things like this. And they have made it very clear multiple times. So it's not about ideas. It's about what they want each thing to facilitate and whether or not you agree with that from a fundamental fun design. And I'm telling you right now, you're going to be at odds literally forever. Oh my God, we got another one. There's like 3 theses in a row about the last week. Baldesion has a huge clear rate despite its systems and not because of it. Without the Discord, it would have been dead on arrival, and that only came to be because the system to get in was horrible. Deliver Regine is still at least on weekly in the... Hey, I mentioned that earlier. And in-zone raids are pretty active still. Anecdotally, again, you have to be really playing. I've tried going in and seeing if people are doing CLL and Dalriada, and a lot of the times it's been bad. I've had people come to me saying they can't get anyone to do them. Delubrum, realistically, always the worst, but people have to get into PFs for Delubrum. CLL and Dalriada is largely an anecdotal problem, because sometimes it's active, sometimes it isn't. It just depends on when you're actually playing. No matter how you look at it, the entrance system into the tower is completely stupid for what it requires inside. I don't know that you can relate the entry to what it... I guess you're saying that because it enters into the zone itself, which has such a mishmash of like different skill level players, that it doesn't make sense for it to be so open. I guess that makes sense. Even the Japanese side is baffled by the design choice and already hated BA way back then. You say that. The statics don't like it because people... So Japan is a very interesting case. Japan is a very pug-friendly area, where effectively everyone who is going into a content cares about how they perform and how they should be performing in that content. So what that means is BA actually had random pugs that would come together and get it done, that didn't need discords, because everyone who actually wanted to go in the zone, like the majority of players, or at least enough players, were like, okay, cool. Well, I know this is what we need to do, so let's all go in and figure it out, and like, make sure we have everything that we need. It will never happen in North America, I can tell you that. But what ends up happening is, because of that, when Japan tries to put together a static for something like this, the other 24 players in the instance are players that are pretty regularly capable of doing things like this. And, well, like, it's already kind of baked in, so it's at such at odds with their community in particular. But that being said, when the statics aren't going, from what I've heard, JP has been getting random instance pug clears in Forked Tower, because everyone knows what they need to do. They go in, literally the groups like line up, from what I understand, at the entrance. They make sure that they communicate who has, we need somebody in 1 to 3 who has in 1, 2, or 3 that has thief, someone in 4, 5, 6 that has thief, someone in 1, and then people just do it. They just get it together. So you have 30 minutes to even clear the first boss before the timer extends. So they usually can take like 10 minutes and then clear the boss by like the 15-minute mark, and then have like 25 minutes, then they get through the whole, and then usually it's fine for the rest of the way. So it's really straight. It's one of those where like statics get a little frustrated, but NA pugs get the most frustrated, or like non-JP pugs get the most frustrated, because there's just no real coordinating that with North American players, because the mentality has just never worked. With all due respect, now it's almost impossible to get in if you're not a big content creator as you are, or you aren't on the Discord. Okay, the content creator part is completely irrelevant. The majority of people doing their clears, the majority are not content creators in any regard. They are just people who have either fostered friendships or communities over the years, putting together, pulling together groups of people that they've played with for a long, long time. That was the world first group. I mean, Xeno was in it. I think Arthur's was in it, but they didn't like pull it together. That was, I think it was Kana who pulled that one together. We kind of just know people from being in the space for so long, but we've rated, like, they're basically we're equal to them is what we're saying. Like, I didn't have a group, so I asked, hey, do you guys have any spots? And they said, no, but if a fill opens up, we'll let you know. They didn't like clear room for me and yo, Mr. Happy wants to do, yo, we gotta get Mr. Happy in here. No, nobody gives a shit. They want to clear. They don't give a fuck if I'm in there or not. And then they had spots, so like as fills would open, if a spot was open, I would go. And there were some nights where they didn't have a spot open, so I couldn't go. It was as simple as that. The second part where they're in the Discord, again, I mentioned it earlier, at this point you have to want to do the content, right? I can understand if you don't like joining Discords. Again, I don't like joining Discords. But it's such a norm nowadays, I've just gotten over it, right? I might like wince, like, I might just sigh, ugh, not again, you know? But it's like, it is what it is. Like, for what it is, yeah, you probably want to be coordinated. It's probably for the better. Now, I will say this, the game doesn't support that well enough, even though it seems like that's kind of what the direction is. And I think that's a valid criticism. One that I think I've beaten over the head enough. The whole 48 player, 72 player instance not really being a metric that makes sense. 24 probably would have made more sense if they were going to go with the 72 player instance. You can shout to go in and the zone will come to you. That will never happen. Ever. I have never done that, and that will not happen because they know it's suicide. I might get a few lucky bites if I did that. Maybe get to like 15, 16, maybe just barely enough to put in the ciphers, if people even want to spend their silver or gold for a guaranteed death, pretty much. If I shout in the zone, nobody's like, oh man, Mr. Happy wants to go in, I'm gonna go join him. No, they're trying to get whatever else there is done, and there's no guarantee there's even enough level 20s in the zone. So, just, when people say that, I like to say, stop putting yourself in a bubble. Let's stop putting creators on a pedestal that makes what they do seem unreachable. You have to want to do it. That is true of almost everything in Final Fantasy XIV, and it's true kind of in life. If you just look at other people and see what they're accomplishing and say, I could never do that, then you're just going to stick yourself in a hole, and you're not going to be able to go anywhere with it. You need to be willing to be like, okay, so there are Discords that run this. Let me figure out what Discord I want to look at and see if I want to give it a try. Maybe it's just too weird. Like maybe you end up trying that and you don't like it. Great. At least you gave it a shot. That's fair. But then you can't be like, well, that sucks that it's like that. You know what I mean? It's like, you're just creating too many imaginary barriers to entry. The barrier to entry is that 48 people in the same instance is a terrible thing to try to have to do. And I think everyone's being vocal about that, even myself. That being said, that is not the key problem, because guess what? Those groups, they go through 15 minutes of headache most of the time, and then they get in. Maybe they get a sniper. Okay, a good group looks at the sniper and asks, do you know the mechanics? What do you want to play? You integrate them in some way, and you be like, okay, listen, there are some mechanics we just need you to not die to. That's what we used to do with BA. And BA groups regularly, if a sniper gets in over someone, they would invite them in, like, yo, come on, get in the Discord so we can, like, listen to calls. Because, like, if you're going to be here, we want you to be a part of it. And, yeah, I know when it's going for, like, World First Week 1, that doesn't happen. But week 2 or 3, that was a pretty normal thing that was happening and continued on for years and years. So, again, don't create imaginary barriers for entry when you're perfectly capable of doing it. I will say this, though. Again, I mentioned earlier, the fact that we've gotten a lot of raid content, totally valid criticism, and I think that alone is a reason to want a CLL Dalriada equivalent, more so than a BA equivalent, because raiders have been eaten really, really good for the last several years, and not everyone wants to be a raider, like a serious raider. So the double difficulty thing, actually, I think facilitates that the most, so... but it's like you just said, a player of second class. There's no second class player unless you make yourself a second class player. You decide when you look at you go, I'm a second class player. Why? Why are you a second class player? You don't have to be. There's nothing telling you have to be. It has nothing to do with being a creator. It's nothing to do with having a ton of gil or playing the game 16 hours. You just have to want to do content. I know people play 2 days a week who clear ultimates. They're not second class. They just play the game when they can, and they're like, I'm going to do this thing. Oh, cool, I got it done. Great. You know what I mean? It's just, yeah. I understand some of the criticisms, but just don't put yourself in a box like that. All right, finally scroll down to another actual question. Hashtag that one day of the week with Mr. Happy. I like that. Hello, my friend. Been a while since my last question. I know Occult Crescent is the new hotness right now, but my question instead concerns Cruiserweight Savage. Or rather, one particular aspect tied to it. This is going to be pretty wordy, so oh boy, yes it is. So to preface this, I say that I did not beat Asfidelos. My casual group, by the way, most of the time people feed me all of this. Most of the time you don't need it. You don't need this much, but I get it because I'm a wordy person too. My casual group at the time, I got, I think, halfway through P4 SP1 and called it quits after a few weeks of failed prog following 2 members leaving. Never came back to it. Despite this, I still naively felt that Abyssos was going to be similar in difficulty to Asfidelos. Needless to say, I was wrong, and I got humbled pretty quick. Lesson learned there. Keeping that in mind, my own personal expectation going into Cruiserweight was that I wanted my clear to be within 10 weeks at the latest. Actually a really solid goal for yourself. This is because the tier directly follows light heavyweight, the tier, if I'm correctly, that had the highest week 1 and overall completion rate in the game's history. I don't know that off the top of my head, but you might be right. Meaning I expect a hell of a difficulty snapback in line with that, similar to the difficulty jump with Abyssos. And with M6S add phase and all of M8S, I'd say the snapback, M8S isn't that bad. It's a long fight, but it's not that bad. Anyway, my group got the clear week 7. Congrats, you got your goal, which I, of course, am more than satisfied with. But the week prior, some of my group expressed frustrations about not having beaten it within 4 weeks, which was the original expectation of the group, only mentioned largely in passing. Similarly, a buddy of mine led and recruited a group with the original expectation of clearing within 4 weeks, but as of the time of writing, they wrapped up week 10 and still haven't cleared M8S, though they did reach LWL for the first time, so they're close. Yeah, they're basically at the end. Not to mention their group had 2 members leave, 1 temporary and 1 permanent, early on due to the disconnect between their expectations and their actual pace. Based on my sample size, my question is this: is just me, or did hardly anyone actually set or temper their expectations properly relative to the context surrounding the tier? It's an interesting question, because you answered your own question of exactly what happened. Scroll back up. I naively went into Abyssos, considering it was going to be the same difficulty as Asfidelos. Needless to say, I was wrong. I got humbled pretty quick. I would just say they did the same thing you did. They just set that expectation. And to be fair, the newer you are to raiding, the easier it is to set that expectation. I'm willing to bet the people with the expectation for 4 weeks or under this was not their first raid tier, but they didn't want to take it too super seriously. So I don't think it's a matter of tempering or setting their expectations properly. I think that more often than not, players fall into, how do I put this? They don't really think about the difficulty jump because we're still playing Final Fantasy XIV, or they don't have enough experience with the game to make an expectation in the first place that makes sense. But they still kind of want to because they hear of other people's successes. But I think this is honestly just another, this is just what happened to you. Just now you're on the other end of it where you've already been there and you're like, why didn't they set the expectations? It's kind of like whenever somebody asks me a question that's been really obvious if someone's played the game for a long time. And I don't know how long they've played the game, but they ask the question, I go, what the hell? Everyone knows that. But then I find out they've only been playing for like 2 months. And it's like, oh, okay. It's kind of this, is like you're dealing with people who just have never had to set the expectation or never cared about setting a proper expectation. They just know what they want off of what other people have experienced. And yeah, this tier was good. This tier was no Abyssos. I promise you that. I think that's pretty obvious to say as well. But yeah, and I did warn people about light heavyweight. I was like, yo, all these people getting week 1 light heavyweight clears, you better be ready for a reality check when it comes to ultimate in the 2nd tier, because it is not going to be that smooth of an experience for some of you. But not everyone listens to me, because why would they? Not everyone watches me, so they couldn't listen to me. So yeah, that's where I'm at with that. I think they just had a similar experience to you. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hi, Haps. Hi, how you doing? Doing all right. Question about Fork Tower. Do you know anyone who likes the current system for Android? I mean, we kind of just beat this over the head earlier. I think everyone has criticisms about it, whether it be the casual players who maybe want to hop into an instance, or these static or Discord players who don't want anyone encroaching on their space. There are answers to that. I mean, honestly, you could farm ciphers for an hour, get 10 ciphers, and then you know, pretty much guarantee entry because most normal players are not going to throw 10 ciphers at the thing. People forget you don't have to put in 1 cipher and compete or no ciphers and compete. You can get about 8 to 10,000 gold fragments in an hour if you're doing a decent gold farm party, and that gets, you can have so many ciphers that the average player would never go in. So the Discord players actually still have a solution to that, even long term. Like, let's say the Discord players eventually make having 10 sanguine ciphers minimum the expectation if you're joining on the Discord. Not a great thing, I'll admit, but it's a possibility, right? That would fix their side of the entry problem, other than getting everyone in the instance, which over time will get easier anyway for them. So it's still not even really an issue. So it's the casual players that kind of just suffer at the end. I think that with this system, no matter what, when it came out, if the whole entering this without a direct way in, there was always going to be problems, complaints, and they're completely valid. I mean, I've made them too. But in the long term, this probably won't be a problem in the future, and maybe they designed it for that, which isn't a good idea either. But no, I don't think anyone... I think, no, you know what? No, some people do like the way the raid is entered. It is because it gives it a sense of, like, continuity with the zone itself. But again, it eats so much of the people population of a zone that it's just... again, you either need a bigger zone or you need only 24 people in there, I think. I think that would have balanced things a lot better, probably in all regards. Hashtag Mondays, am I right? Hey, Mr. Happy. Hi. By the time you're reading this, we'll have had Phantom jobs for a while. The devs have stated they wanted to use the system to try out actions and job design that's a bit more out of the box than the current system allows. Well, very specifically, they wanted to put in jobs that may not ever be implemented into Final Fantasy XIV. Do any of the Phantom actions strike you as something you'd like to have in the main game? As a healer main, I'd love something like the Geomancer bells that trigger repeatedly when the target is hit. Honestly, if I could just put a marker on the... As a white mage, if I could even just put the marker on the tank to trigger my Lily Bell... like let's say that I summon my Lily Bell, and if I put an Aqua Veil on someone, then they become the target that detonates my Lily Bell. I would take that. I mean, it's pretty much the same thing as what the Geo Bell does, kind of. Or predict from Oracle, or you have to wait till the right buff. True story, the 14 mobile game has that. The job gauge for Bard in the 14 mobile game, it requires you to press it at the right time in order to activate a skill. So it's like a rhythm game in a sense. You don't have to do it very often, but you do have to do it for maximum output. And so they kind of have those. Yeah, I think there's a handful of things. There's not really that many things that are that off-the-wall crazy. A lot of them just don't make sense in most of Final Fantasy XIV because we don't use those systems like trap detection and opening lockpicks and stuff. We just don't have that in the rest of the game. Obviously I just named Thief, but then like Ianuki isn't anything special. Zeninage is throwing Gil, which is, you know, funny, but like I don't think we really want that in the rest of the game unless you're rich already. We have nothing else to do with Gil, right? So yeah, there's some stuff, but I think you kind of hit the main ones that are a little bit out there. Because like Cannoneer is like, I mean, technically we almost had Musketeer at one point, but that'd have just been Cannoneer, maybe. Maybe we will. Maybe they'll do Cannoneer anyway, and because, you know, Musketeer, maybe that'll be the new Fizz range, and they'll just shoot cannons the entire time. It's entirely possible. So yeah, but I think you hit the biggest ones. I think Geomancer and Oracle's skills are the most in line with something that is like almost feasible if they just made some adjustments to it. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hey, Haps. Hi. My question would be, would you want the relics to have a special bonus in OC? I think they will. At the end of the second zone, we'll probably be able to upgrade them with materials from both Fork Tower, Blood, and Magic. And that'll probably be what does the trick. They didn't do it here because it's the beginning. I wouldn't have expected it here anyway. At first I was like, man, that's lame. And then I went, wait, why would I expect it here? I should expect it in 0.55 at the end of everything. Also, funny bit, so you mentioned the jobs that don't get them later down the line. Somebody in the BA Discord, I don't know if they were memeing, but they seem to be pretty serious about it since they just called it in the middle of like raid, like it was just a discussion. Apparently jobs that came out after Stormblood have the elemental bonus from the weapon baked into their job existence in Eureka. So for example, like Reaper, Gunbreaker, Sage, apparently they just permanently act like they have the extra elemental bonus that they can never get from the weapon, but without ever actually getting it. So right from elemental level 1. I have not tested that, so I could be regurgitating nonsense, but it shocked me when I heard that. When it was talked about as like something inside of a BA that I was doing literally right before OC came out. So that's something to consider. It's still not as cool as having a weapon, but you know, it's something. But yeah, no, I want it to have bonuses. in there for sure when it's like fully upgraded. Keep in mind there's fully upgraded, get the achievement, and then there's like bonus upgraded, which has like no achievement and it's just for like doing things like Fork Tower and stuff. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey Haps, hi. Why do you think the devs seem to have implemented the Fork Tower at the same time? I mean, there's no way I was going to avoid this question a million times, right? I genuinely think they just looked at the long-term participation data for BA and the community fostering that it created and went, just do that again. They tried to make some changes to remove some of the headache by giving you the ciphers. I do think that people need to remember you can technically put as many ciphers in there as you want to guarantee entry. As long as it's more than somebody else. So if Discords really want that guaranteed spot, then eventually they might just require a large amount. But then there's still the struggles of actually getting into the instance. Is it that they purely expected randoms to do it and work out coordination? I don't think they expect. Maybe because Japan does it, they did expect that. But they knew NA would have the workaround of Discord, so they felt like that security net. But I mean, I think I've beaten this point enough in this video. But I do genuinely think they looked at how long BA has remained active across the world, how often it's run, probably like 5-6 times a week, probably more depending on the season, per data center, per Discord server, as a matter of fact. And even Fork Tower has got plenty of Discords that are doing like fragment runs or progression runs and are working their way towards clear runs and making sure there's lots of really clear resources for people to have. So I think they just expected that, while knowing that JP, everyone kind of always comes in prepared, and it just kind of works out that way. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi, Mr. Happy. Hi, how are you and I doing? We're doing great. I have a question regarding character customization. Do you think at any given point the devs will add in additional facial options that include full thick beards for male characters? I mean, they'll include them for both characters. Who cares? If demand is high enough. I mean, people have been asking for this for years. This is not a new thing. Like, everyone's been asking for beards for literally ever. And we just keep getting maybes. So, I mean, the demand is definitely there. They've said that the character creator is a lot harder to add things to than the esthetician. So if anywhere, I expect it there. But I mean, with the graphics update, I mean, I have to assume that the next FanFest, they're going to be like beards, and that's going to be one of their big announcements. That's going to get roaring applause, like we got with the double die slots. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hey, Happy. Hi. Hope you had a good week. Solid. 2 questions today. With the recent Front Mission 3 announcement for Switch, I'm curious if you think the Fable Tactics Remaster will also be going the same route. Well, I mean, we know the so this was before the Tactics Remaster was revealed. I can see it was 5 days ago. I mean, the Tactics Remaster was always a matter of time. After Tactics Ogre, I was like, yeah, no, they're doing Final Fantasy Tactics at some point. There's no way they're doing like Tactics Ogre and not taking the free money that is Final Fantasy Tactics. Come on, this is Square here. So yeah, no, but not a Switch exclusive. No, Square's really trying to get away from this whole like content, this whole platform exclusive thing, unless they're kind of trapped. Bravely Default, I'm wondering if re-releasing Bravely Default on Switch first was a deal, because Nintendo had exclusive rights to Bravely Default 1. So they probably still have those exclusive rights, which is why they released it as a Switch 2 exclusive. But I wonder if part of their contingency, and we'll find out probably within a year, I wonder if part of their contingency for Bravely Default on Switch 2 is that they will allow to be releasing it on Steam or something later. I really, really think that they would have worked that out, because they seem really, really committed to trying to make things multi-platform from this point on. Final Fantasy VII R3 maybe has the same problem, where they already agreed to it. Now it has to be on there first. But everything else, I think from this, we're literally looking at like the all-platform Square Enix coming soon. Oh, there was a second question. My bad. Second question is odd. I was doing a Cult Crescent. A few of us started talking about what Phantom jobs could see the light of day as a proper job. Kind of brought that up earlier with the things that could go outside of it. As an elemental wheel job is not the least. Basically, which of the Phantom jobs do you think could be properly implemented? Yeah, I kind of answered that earlier with Oracle and Cannoneer and a few others. So yeah, keep in mind whether or not they would be similar to their Phantom job equivalent or completely reworked are two completely different discussions. I could almost rework any idea in my own head and probably make it make enough sense, even if it's not balanced necessarily. So I think my earlier answer kind of answers this enough in the same vein. Hashtag Mondays with Miss Ivy. Hello, Haps. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. My question is about the 14 community. Uh-oh. Since the start of Dawn Trail, there have been people called everything too difficult. Lately, I noticed there's more of them. They're usually very active and loud. Do you think that after seeing these complaints, Square Enix will reverse their path of trying things differently and go back to pleasing the people at the bottom of the skill level? By the way, I honestly don't understand how someone can play through 6 expansions and not learn the basics. I think the average difficulty of the game that we're seeing for normal mode trials, alliance raids, I don't think that's going anywhere. I think that's going to remain exactly the same because you've said it yourself. After 6 expansions, you shouldn't see a split damage marker over your head and wonder what it does. That being said, the too difficult thing, it depends on which too difficult crowd you're talking about. One of them is player base that maybe like does content but just notices that it's kind of like upscaling to keep up with the people who play a lot and who are like really skilled. They just may be a little bit intimidated, and to them it's kind of a tough call because like you don't want to make it easier just for them, because then if you don't bring it down to them, encourage them to come up to you. And I think the game can do a better job at that, specifically having more bosses within a raid tier that keep the difficulty curve kind of similar. We actually had an okay difficulty curve this time outside of the ad phase, but the ad phase means that when you get to 7, there's like some things that are tough, but you generally progress to the end of that fight pretty quickly, even if you don't clear it right away. The other side of the too difficult crowd is one that I kind of brought up earlier, where we've gotten so much raid content that players aren't interested in, specifically players who do not raid are not interested in, that it's a little discouraging that they, you know, have normal mode raids, alliance raid, and then like, you know, the moon. And like, but in terms of combat stuff, it's like, unless they want to go do fates and like grind out that stuff, or like do any sort of like, they just haven't gotten anything that's like they can regularly engage in, like a CLL or a Doriana. And I think that's, again, a fairer thing. I think I mentioned that earlier. And that's why they're a little bit more active and loud. And listen, I said that we probably needed something that was a more casual grind that players could work on earlier in the expansion. That's why I wanted a Cult Crescent earlier. That's why I wanted a lot of things earlier. So I feel for them. But it depends on which crowd you're talking about. And no, I don't think there's going to be any course correction here. The fight design has been phenomenal. They've been getting praised for it nonstop, and I don't think they're going to stop because some people find it too difficult. Hashtag Monday with Mr. Happy. Hi, how are you? I'm doing all right. Hope all's well in your new place. Knee place. I read it new because I know that's what it's supposed to say. I've been thinking about your statement, more ways to obtain relics. What do you think about winning ranked 5v5, having a higher the ranked? No. Okay. I can't, obviously it's dumb for me to say no when I say I want more options, right? Ranked PvP is definitely not the place to put relic progression. Those two things are so at odds. Like, you want to put that in, like, maybe making it for wolf marks so that, I don't know if you guys can hear Sophie through the microphone. She's having a time in Overwatch. Oh, and it sounds like one of our cats is also having a time. Either way, like making it so you can do any PvP, like front lines or the casual queue, and then you get wolf marks, then you can buy the currency. That makes sense. But ranked PvP, it's like when people say add it to Criterion. It's like, you mean variant, because Criterion is like a raider thing. Like, yeah, would raiding activities be cool to get them? Yeah, and usually, even if a step's not made for raiders, you sometimes can make some progress. Like, I remember people sometimes asking if they could have their relic weapon equipped to light farm during our weekly reclears, just to collect the light. They're like, dude, we're so far ahead of the DPS. Can I just use my worst weapon for this so I can get some light to like chip away at that? Or like, yeah. And I guess that's a prime example. That's a good example, I suppose. But ranked, no, because you don't want people who just want their relic going into ranked, and then, you know, and then if you have to win, and also winning, like, most people are already intimidated at winning ranked. Like, the ranked community is not that large. Sticking people who want to do their relic in there, they're not going to be motivated to try harder and win. They just want to get their relic. I mean, that's the reason why we ended up at tomestones in the first place. So you're sticking people who are not motivated naturally to win in there, and then if they're not winning, they're not going to do it. So it's like, it doesn't solve anything, basically. It creates another problem, if anything. All right, and that was actually the last question. There was a lot of comments this week, and I took some time to answer some of them just because they continued some of the important discussions that have been going on. Hopefully the points I made were very clear. But anyway, that is going to be a wrap for this week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. Be sure to like and subscribe. Be sure to ask your questions in the comment section of the video below. Be sure to go buy things from the card shop with the discount code Mr. Happy. Steel Series with the discount code Mr. Happy. And don't forget about the Patreon, which gives you absolutely nothing. So you don't have to do it at all, but I like to mention it occasionally anyway. So with that, I will see all of you in the next video. Until then, bye-bye.